we're going to be covering North Idaho Rare Plant Working Group plants. And I'll kick off by introducing Karen Colson, who is going to be our first presenter. Karen Colson has served as a botanist with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, Idaho Fish and Wildlife Office for over 13 years. She works primarily in listing and recovery, as well as providing botanical support to other program areas. Karen previously held positions with the Bureau of Land Management and the Nature Conservancy. So with that, Karen, take it away.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, I was actually asked to give kind of an overview of the Fish and Wildlife Service plant species. So I'm going to be sharing a presentation here. Let me try to share my screen. Hopefully this will come up. Okay, so I just want to make sure everybody's seeing that first slide.
Looks great.
Great, awesome. Yeah, so I'm just going to give you some quick updates on our Fish and Wildlife Service trust species. And so I don't have a lot of time, so I'm going to really focus on the current information, some highlights. But I did want to provide some background information for folks that in particular might be new. These are our Fish and Wildlife Service trust species. I say that because they're not necessarily listed. These could also be species that we have conservation agreements with. So we're implementing conservation for all of these species. But here are those plants for Idaho. We have 4 listed species. These are all listed as threatened. 1 that was recently delisted, 1 proposed for listing, and 3 that were candidates, but were fairly recently taken off the candidate list. So these are the ones I'm going to talk to you about today. And Brittany, feel free to give me like a 5-minute warning. I don't want to go over time, but I have a lot to cover. I did want to go through some background just for some context about some of the stuff I'll be talking about. So just really quickly, once we list a species, we immediately move into trying to recover and delist that species. So we go through our recovery planning process. And this is a little different than it has been in the past. We've kind of replaced one huge recovery plan with a 3-part framework. So you'll see on the bottom here, this is kind of our traditional recovery plan. It was really big. It was usually bound. It seemed very static, even though we try to use an adaptive management approach. So we've tried to kind of address that by breaking it up into 3 parts. So the background section and the species status information that used to be in the full recovery plan is now broken out. And this is called a species status assessment, or an SSA. And it's really nice because it's just the biology. It's supposed to be updated regularly as we learn new information. And then you have the recovery plan, which is very reduced now. It kind of has the overarching goals and criteria and actions, but we've broken out kind of the specific roadmap. And this is what we call a recovery implementation strategy. And so the benefit of this is that it's going to be very flexible. We can change it a lot easier as we adapt our approaches to recovery. The other thing is, once a species is listed, we're required at least every 5 years to do a status review. So we collect all the best available current information. We evaluate it to see if that status is still appropriate. So in here, we could recommend a change, either uplist, downlist, delist, or we could recommend we maintain the status as it is. And it's important to know that this is just a recommendation. So if we did want to pursue that recommendation, then we would have to go through the formal rulemaking process. And then if we're fortunate enough to delist a species, we do develop a post-delisting monitoring plan. And we're required to implement a monitoring program for at least 5 years after a species is delisted. This is kind of like an insurance policy to make sure we made the right decision. I also want to point out, like I always try to, that in ecological services of Fish and Wildlife Service, which is the branch I'm in, we are not a land management agency, as you know, and so we rely completely, in my opinion, on our partners to implement our recovery plans and on the ground conservation actions. And so I always want to give a shout out to all of you, because you are the ones that are making recovery happen. And so at least for the species that Idaho is lead for, we have technical teams for each of those species. And these are the folks that really are doing the hard work of recovering these species, as well as other partners and volunteers as well. We have gone through a little bit of a organizational change in our office, so I wanted to kind of highlight that for you. We have some new people. I wanted to quickly kind of introduce them so you know who to get in touch with. As you know, I'm Karen Colson, and I'm the botanist for Fish and Wildlife Service in Idaho. I'm also specifically the lead for Spalding's catchfly, McFarland's 4 o'clock, and water Howellia. But recently we've tried to distribute kind of the species lead roles to make things more efficient, and this is for wildlife and plants. So we've distributed these lead roles a little bit more. So Greg Burak, he's actually my supervisor, and he's the lead for slipspot peppergrass. Casey Dumke is the lead for ladies tresses. Robert Yeager's the lead for whitebark pine. Katie Powell, Chris Paintbrush, and Chris Rain, Packard's milk vetch. And so when a species is listed and it's a multi-state species, they designate one state to be the lead, and then that person associated with that species is the lead to kind of really make sure the recovery plan gets implemented, the 5-year reviews get written. And so for some of these species, Idaho is the lead and some Idaho isn't. So I'll point that out as I go through them. So I'll move on to the updates. The ones I'm going to start out with are the ones that are no longer on our lists, either listed or candidates. The first is Chris Paintbrush. And like I said, I'm not going to go through a lot of detail. I'm just going to kind of touch on the highlights just to make sure I keep on time here. But as most of you know, Chris Paintbrush is known only from a single population on Mount Harrison. It was a candidate, but it was removed in 2012, based largely on conservation measures that we implemented through a conservation agreement between the Fish and Wildlife Service and the Sawtooth National Forest, as well as many volunteers and partners. But we are still, really interested in this species, particularly because the main threat is smooth brome. And until that's eradicated, we really need to continue to make sure we're treating that threat as well as monitoring the others. So we recently signed a few months ago a memorandum of understanding between Fish and Wildlife Service and Sawtooth National Forest to kind of just commemorate that shared long-term commitment to this species. And once that was signed, that lead role transitioned from me to Katie Powell. So she'll now be the species lead. The next is Packard's milk vetch. This was also removed from the candidate list, largely based on conservation measures implemented in a conservation agreement that is still in place. I did want to just highlight a couple of things that might be of interest to you. The Fish and Wildlife Service recently did a milk vetch story map. This kind of highlights all of the Fish and Wildlife Service trust milk vetch species across the country. So it's pretty cool. If you Google Marvelous Milk Vetch Story Map, it'll pop up, and Packard's milk vetch is highlighted in that. Another thing I wanted to let you know about is a study that USGS is kind of leading. It's for Sandberg bluegrass, and it was funded by Fish and Wildlife Service and BLM. And it's examining the effectiveness of different posy seeding rates following disturbance. So this was initiated at the Packard site, and now they're also working with the Army National Guard to continue this research. And recently, this lead role did transition from me to Chris Rain in our office. The next one is Goose Creek Milk Vetch. Those other two were Idaho endemic, so our office was the lead. The lead for Goose Creek Milk Vetch is the Utah office. There's also a conservation agreement currently in place for this species across the range. I wanted to highlight a couple of things. Utah is conducting a PVA for this species, and a report is anticipated in the next few months. And from an Idaho perspective, Idaho Department of Fish and Game recently did a survey and field assessment of this species. I think that report's still in draft form. And then we have water Howellia. This species was actually recently delisted. It was delisted in 2021. We do have a post-delisting monitoring plan in place. That's going to be a 15-year monitoring plan. So we're really going to make sure we made the right decision on this one. Idaho isn't specifically a part of that post-delisting monitoring plan, but we will be monitoring the Idaho populations, and we have funding in place to do that this summer and then in 2023 as well. Okay, so now I will talk about the species that are listed. And again, these are all listed as threatened. Well, or proposed for listing, I should clarify that. So white bark pine is proposed for listing. An SSA was completed in 2018. That's being updated based on public comment that was received from the proposed rule that was put out. They're still working on the final rule. So that has not been published. So it is still proposed threatened at this point. And when that final listing comes out, the SSA will also come out as well. The next is, oh, and I should mention that Wyoming is the lead office for this species, but Rob Yeager in our office is our Idaho lead. And then you ladies tresses, Utah is the lead for this. Cassidy Dumpke in our office is our Idaho lead. As a lot of you know, we received a petition way back when in 1996 to delist this species. We've recently initiated an SSA to help us evaluate the species status throughout the range. That's currently in the peer review stage. And the next step, typically when that is finalized, is to then move into doing a 5-year review. And that will help us determine if a status change is warranted. So once the 5-year review gets done, then we'll kind of determine whether we want to pursue that delisting recommendation or if the status should stay the same. So we'll kind of stay tuned for that recommendation. Next is slick spot peppergrass. And our office is the lead. Greg Burak is the current lead for the species in our office. It's listed as threatened and an SSA has been completed for that species. The final critical habitat rule is being prepared. We've taken in public comment and incorporated them into that draft, but it hasn't been published yet. We are concurrently working on a draft recovery plan as well. That's kind of recently been initiated. They're hoping to have that available for public comment the end of September 22. And after that, hopefully within a year, that will be finalized. Next is Spalding's catchfly. This is a wide-ranging species in Idaho, Oregon, Washington, and Montana. And Idaho is the lead office, so I'm the lead for this species. We have a huge technical team supporting recovery of this species. There's members, over 40 members from all 4 of the states, all different agencies and organizations, nonprofits, tribes, private landowners. And so these are really super committed, passionate group of folks that are just regularly pursuing recovery of the species. And that is guided by the recovery plan. Just a little background on this. I'm going to give a little more information on this species and McFarland, since Idaho is the lead for implementation of this recovery plan. So this is a map of all of the key conservation areas. In the recovery plan, the strategy really relies on creating or having really large, healthy, intact populations of the species scattered throughout the range of the species. And so here's a map of all of those areas in all 4 states. And each of these areas does have a lead designated. And so in the recovery plan, these key conservation areas have to meet certain criteria. So for example, they have to have over 500 plants, over 80% native vegetation, stable or increasing trend for at least 20 years. And so the leads at each of these areas is really working really hard to make sure those areas meet the criteria in the recovery plan so we can eventually recover and delist this species. We've had a lot of accomplishments from research to survey to on-the-ground conservation. A big push is outplanting, trying to get those populations that have less than 500 plants to be over that 500 number. Another thing that we are doing recently is really trying hard to create habitat management plans at each of these areas so they can really help guide the conservation strategy at each population. We also recently completed a range-wide habitat suitability model and range-wide seed banking effort. Some of this work has also been published. I wish I could go through more of all the great work our partners are doing. But in Idaho, I wanted to point out the 3 key conservation areas that we focus on here. Paradise Ridge, Gormson Butte is up in the Palouse, and we have Garden Creek, Craig Mountain Key Conservation Area, and the Center Ridge Key Conservation Area further to the south. And again, I wish I could talk more about what our partners are doing at these areas. But I did recently complete the 5-year review for the species that was completed in 2020. So if you want to learn more about what we've been doing across the range of the species, please take a look at that. It's really in depth. I think it covers about 10 years of work. It's already kind of outdated because we've done a lot even since then, but that'll give you kind of a great summary of what we're trying to do and what we've already accomplished. And finally, I wanted to talk about McFarland's 4 o'clock. Idaho is the lead Fish and Wildlife Service office, and I'm the lead for that species in our office. This is an Idaho, Oregon endemic on the Imnaha, Snake, and Salmon rivers. We do have a recovery plan for this species, and again, a really dedicated, passionate technical team working towards recovery. We've had tons of accomplishments, just like for Spalding's catchfly, addressing grazing issues, range-wide monitoring, tons of survey work, invasive species control, research, outreach. Habitat management plan development is what we're really focusing on right now at each of these populations. And I'm currently preparing the most recent 5-year review for the species. I'm hoping to have that done by the end of October. And that will incorporate all of the latest and greatest work that all of our partners are doing for the species. I just wanted to mention that one of the big conservation actions in the recovery plan is to treat the invasive non-natives, one of the primary threats. But another kind of focus for us is reintroducing populations, creating new populations, particularly if we can, in more intact areas. And the BLM has been doing a really amazing job. They've already created 2 new populations through transplanting rhizomes. But we wanted to move towards outplantings with the use of seedlings. So the past several years, the team has been working with partners and others to do a lot of the background research to make sure we're doing this very thoughtfully through plant material development, range-wide soil and site assessments, range-wide genetic surveys, habitat suitability models. It's been a lot of great work done by the team and our other partners and researchers. And again, this is so that our approach can really be very effective and efficient and targeted. And the BLM did do their first seedling outplanting, and we really hope this is kind of our focus in the future to do more of these on BLM land, Forest Service land, and others as opportunities arise. So I did want to note that this is a little bit different strategy than is documented in the current recovery plan. So in the 5-year review, it's likely that I'm going to recommend updating the recovery plan, which will also include the development of an SSA for this species. And that will be good because we can kind of incorporate climate change predictions, which will really help us determine where it's appropriate to start thinking about planting some of these newer populations. So just want to give you a heads up that that might be coming out as well. So that's kind of a really quick overview of all of our trust plant species. Please reach out to me anytime if you have questions or want to be involved. I'm always happy to chat, answer questions. Feel free to call me or email me anytime. I did want to quickly point out that a lot of this information you can find on our website. It's called ECOS. This is usually Federal Register notices, 5-year reviews, kind of more formal documents like that. We are transitioning though to a new platform. It's going to be called Ecosphere, and they're currently developing it now. It's going to be a lot more user friendly. It's going to have a lot more information on there. So I think this is going to be really great once it's developed. So in the meantime, you can go to Ecos to find things, but it's kind of down a lot because they're, transitioning. And so if it's ever down or you can't find something again, just feel free to reach out to me. And lastly, I just want to thank you all again. I can't say enough. You are the reason that our species get conserved and recovered. And we just really appreciate all of you. And so thank you so much. And if I have time, I'll take some questions.
Yeah, we've got a couple minutes for questions if anybody's got any.
I'm going to stop sharing this and see if this works.
Yeah, I've got a question on the Howilia. Now, I understand that the populations in Washington and Montana have done very well enough that it was able to be delisted, but how have the populations in Idaho done?
Yeah, so we take a range-wide look when we delist a species, and I think I can probably pass that question off better to the Idaho Department of Fish and Game, since they were historically doing the monitoring. I think we have some concerns still about non-natives at our populations. We have very few compared to the range-wide distribution of this species. And that's why we really want to continue to track and monitor our populations in Idaho to make sure that they do, continue to persist. So to me, that's something that we care about, even if it's not listed in Idaho. It's still important to our state. And so that's why, even though we're not part of the post-delisting monitoring plan, that's still one of our priorities, is monitoring those populations and making sure that we're aware of the invasive species concerns at those populations. And so I don't know if Janice or Lynn are on the call and want to add to that.
Thanks, Karen. I can just say that we haven't monitored it in probably four or more years, and we have no plans to in the future as we've scaled down our rare plant work. As Fish and Game has scaled down its rare plant work. It wasn't looking great the last time we looked at it. And for a long time, reed canary grass, Phalaria randonacea, has been a big problem. Continues to fill in those little populations, those little ponds, shallow ponds, and decrease the habitat. But that's all I know, since, as I said, that's several years old now.
Yeah, and that information was incorporated into that final delisting decision and the rules. So you can read that final rule. I will say, like I said, our office is funding the monitoring that will be conducted this summer and next summer at a minimum. Then we'll continue to pursue funding. And I think it was Janice who trained Brenda Earhart at the Latah Soil and Water Conservation District how to do the monitoring. So she'll be the one that's actually conducting that monitoring. And she has a lot of experience with monitoring and data analysis and report prep. So that will be, they'll continue the quality work that Fish and Game was doing monitoring before they weren't able to continue it. So again, we do have funding in place that is going to get done the next 2 years and hopefully as well into the future. So I will continue to share those results. That's all public information. So when those reports are completed, they'll be available to anyone that's interested.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, Karen, I got a question for you. I know that Craig Mountain area burned this past summer. I was wondering if you guys have any idea if that impacted any of the Spalding's catch fly populations or anything like that.
Yeah, range wide, we've had some unfortunate fire events in Spalding's catch fly habitat. So this has been a bit of a common theme over the past couple of years for Spalding's. Fortunately, one of the things we've done at our key conservation areas is really worked hard to get monitoring in place. Almost all of our key conservation areas have initiated their trend monitoring. And so this is a really great opportunity at those areas that burn, because most of them have pre-fire data. And so we can look at the future monitoring and compare that back and see, kind of evaluate the response of Spalding's catchfly to fire. So that information will hopefully be coming as we continue that monitoring and we see that response. As far as Craig Mountain, I think it did affect that population, and I think I don't want to misspeak. So I don't know if Craig Johnson or, again, sorry, Lynn, if you want to give a more accurate update of how that fire impacted the population at Craig Mountain.
I don't know if Craig's on here. He could do a lot better than I could, but from what I've heard, most of the EOs did burn. You know, the fire is patchy, but it did burn. Most of the EOs are within the burn perimeter. Let's put it that way. And several of those have burned before in the last, say, 20 years. So, but we haven't done any monitoring since then. So I can't give you any real data on that or cite any data.
Yeah, as you know, it depends kind of on the site quality pre-burn, right? But in a lot of these Spalding's catchfly areas, we've seen a fairly good response post-fire, assuming that area is somewhat intact. And so in a lot of these areas, they're not necessarily going back and even reseeding. They're kind of waiting for that native vegetation and those Spalding's catchflies to regenerate naturally. But we do have some work going on, for example, at the Mitella, the Lick Creek fire. They are seeding Spalding's catchfly post-fire. So we're going to kind of get to see, compare the results from, if we let it go naturally, see what comes back, and also if we pursue active kind of restoration and see the results of that as well. So it will be interesting once we get some of that data.
Thank you very much, Karen. That was really interesting and informative. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
All right. Now we're going to introduce Derek. Derek is going to be presenting a lot of species today, so we'll get to know him really well by the end of the day. Derek retired from the U.S. Air Force after 22 years and then worked part-time for 15 years for Idaho Fish and Game doing vegetation monitoring. Derek is the president of the Calypso chapter of the Idaho Native Plant Society, the leader of the North Idaho Rare Plant Working Group, and an Idaho Master Naturalist. So take it away, Derek.
So apparently I don't know the word no. So at any rate, so as we were starting to get ready to try to figure out what we wanted to cover here, I noticed that we had not ever officially ranked Spalding's catchfly. So I sent out a request to see if somebody wanted to pick that up, and Blair McLaren of the Nez Perce tribe did, and that'll be the first one that we start off with. So Blair, are you ready?
Yes, thank you, Derek. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, this morning I'm presenting Silene spaldingii. I think you might have to bring up the presentation.
All right, give me just a second.
Thank you. Perfect. Silene spaldingii, commonly referred to as Spalding's campion, Spalding's Silene, or Spalding's catchfly. For the purpose of this presentation, I'll just use Silene. The previous uncalculated rank was S1, and the North Idaho Working Group recommends a rank of S1, S2. Next. Silene is a herbaceous perennial. It is a regional endemic and predominantly found in native bunchgrass communities within prairies, sagebrush steppe, occasionally pine forests, and on the next slide, steep canyon grassland slopes, such as this site above Joseph Creek in Northeast Oregon. Next. Nature Reserve status for Silene is imperiled in Washington, Oregon, and Montana, critically imperiled in British Columbia and Idaho. On the left side of this slide is distribution from USDA and BONAP websites. BONAP is in green and the USDA is crosshatched. There are a few discrepancies from the counties in Montana and Washington, and I believe a false record in Adams County, Idaho. On the right side of the slide shows the range extent in Idaho within Latah, Nez Perce, Lewis, and Idaho counties. This spreadsheet I just put in here just in case we have to refer to it. It lists all the element occurrences for Idaho with all the data I gleaned from observation reports. Silene conservation status. Nature Reserve as a global rank of G2. At that time, there was about 10 sites in Idaho compared to 50 now. Again, is it imperiled in Washington, Oregon, and Montana? BLM listed as a type 1. Listed as critically imperiled in British Columbia. It was designated endangered in Canada in 2005. In the US, Silene was a candidate ESA species for 24 years, proposed for 2 more, and finally listed as threatened in October of 2001. The ensuing recovery plan was finally finished in 2007. Silene ranking factors. There are 50 EOs. Included are, within those are 5 new observations. One, I believe, is on the breaks by Whitebird, Idaho, and 4 along the Snake River south of that. All new sites, according to GIS, are more than a kilometer apart, so I'm assuming they will be separate EOs. The range extent for Idaho is approximately 4,000 square kilometers. It occupies 67 4 square kilometer grid cells. And estimating from the latest visits, there are approximately 8,000 individuals. 17 of those EOs have excellent or good viability. The overall threat impact is very high with many threat factors. Population trends were added from Nature Reserve's global rank for Silene, which showed a short-term decline of 10 to 30% due to invasive species, fire, livestock grazing, and a long-term decline of 50 to 80% due to conversion of native prairie habitat to agriculture and pasture. Now, this is where I have to confess an error on my part. On the Nature Reserve site, the long-term decline was 50 to 80%, but on the calculator, I seen the category for 50 to 70%, which brings the calculated rank to S2. But if you scroll down a little bit on the calculator, there is a 50 to 80% category. And Lynn, I don't know if you're still monitoring the calculator sheets.
I am. I'm looking at trying to find what you're talking about right now, Blair.
On a long-term trend.
Yes, I see the 50 to 80, the CD. You want me to stick that in?
Yeah, punch that in there and you will see
Oh,
that
yeah.
it brings it down to S1, S2, which is what we recommended for
Yep.
the plant anyway. So
Great.
I just seen that error this morning, so sorry about that.
Yeah, now it matches. That's nice.
Just another notes that from that spreadsheet, from all the EOs, 1/3 have less than 10 individuals. 2/3 have 50 or less plants. 2 occurrences are probably likely extirpated because of one got buried and the other one's just overgrazing. And finally, just to note that the global rank should probably be updated since it's been a while since that's been looked at. That's it.
Just queue up a vote.
All right, if there aren't any questions, I guess we can take this one to a vote.
So to clarify, we're voting on an S1, S2, and maintain rare, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, looks like 34 votes for yes, no votes for no. So let's go for it. Derek, who have you got next on the list?
Well, I've got Alma Hansen, but her computer, her internet connection is very flaky, so she asked me to go ahead and make that presentation. I'll go ahead and share my screen here and see if I can pull that one up.
Thank you, Derek. I am on right now, but it is pretty
Okay.
flaky. Appreciate it.
Yeah, you can correct me as I go along here. Hopefully everybody can see my screen here. And now, how do I do this?
So down at the bottom right, there's like a little presentation slideshow thing. It's down in the red bar.
Well, I think I got something right. Yeah.
You can also go at the top there by the save button. There's a play from beginning. It's got a little draw. Yeah, there you go. Right.
That one. No, can't. Oh, this one.
That one.
Ah, because where I usually do it is covered up with another bar from Zoom. So anyway, this one is Sphagnum platyphyllum. It's the flat leaf peat moss. The IMPS hasn't had it on its list before, but it is listed under NatureServe as an S1. And our North Idaho Rare Plant Working Group recommendation is that it be an S1. So sphagnums are there are a lot of them, and they're really hard to tell apart. But they all typically have this crown of branches at the very top, and usually a stem that runs down into the substrate with the side branches off of that. So. And here's the habitat. I assume this budding young botanist, Anna, is that correct?
That's right. It's a grandson.
Okay, so he's out there looking at mosses already. So the rest of you botanists can go ahead and take a clue from that and say, well, it can't be that hard. So jump in and give it a try. So. This kind of shows that it's fairly widely distributed and presently assumed to be an S1 in Idaho. NatureServe has the status as a G5, S1 for Idaho. There are 3 records in Idaho. There's only one that is listed in the IFWIS records as a element of occurrence. but we believe there are 3 different population locations. Overall threats are medium to low. The threat factors seem to be management activities, a small number of populations making this species vulnerable. So, this is where those 3 populations are, 2 in Valley County, 1 in Boise County. It's not listed by anybody at this point other than NatureServe. And here are the ranking factors. The range extent is 760 square kilometers, which would be a C. 3 populations, therefore 3 grid squares. That's a C. Again, 3 occurrences, A. Don't know anything about the viability, but it can't be any higher than A, so it's either an A or B. And the threats are low to medium. You factor all that in. It actually comes out with a S2, but because it's just got those 3 populations, the Rare Plant Working Group felt S1 would be more appropriate. And that's what I've got. So let's see, stop share. So any questions on that?
I have a question. This is Lynn. Does anyone know why with less than 5 populations, NatureServe changed it to an things to an S2? It used to be 5 or less was automatically an S1.
I think it has to do with the level of threats that we had listed for those. So if the threats are low, it comes in as an S2. If the threats are higher, it'd be an S1.
Correct.
But I'm not sure if that's a change that NatureServe made.
Yeah, I think that's correct. And Derek, are these are all on National Forest, I presume?
I'll have to let Alma
Yes.
answer that one.
Yes, they are. One's on the Boise National Forest near Banner Creek. The other 2 are on the Payette. One is at Seasash Summit, which is right close to the road, which we worry about. And the other one is below Buckhorn Peak.
Okay. So we'll also be recommending that the Forest Service add those for special management.
That would be correct.
This is Jennifer Berkey. Could you clarify the source for the Banner Creek location? Like, was that consortium with Pacific Northwest Herbaria, or was that a different source for that location?
Actually, that one was collected by Lisa Hahn when the Idaho Fish and Game did their Idaho water wetlands priority. So she says, so Lisa Hahn did that in 2004. And I think she gave that to Duke University, who verified that specimen. Is that what you wanted?
Yeah, and so you're saying that, so Lisa Hahn, 2004. So when you said it was Idaho Fish and Game, is that part of Idaho Fish and Game's reports? Is that one of the reports?
It is
Okay.
one of those. I think it's one that Lisa did, maybe with Chris Murphy and a couple others. And she called it a large pristine fan. So that's, if you look at it on the satellite, it's up there off of Banner Creek, kind of as you go towards, I think it's called Bull Trout Lake. I've never visited, but she called it a large pristine fan. So it's probably one of the nicest populations we have, or are at least protected from, you know, close to development, like Seasash Summit's right near the road.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Okay, any other questions?
Hey, this is Lisa Harlow. I used to be Lisa Hahn, and so that was.
Lisa, did you remember that collection?
Yeah, actually, it's interesting. I was kind of trying to figure out what it was, but from that description, there's a large fen right on the road to Bull Trout Lake. It's actually quite a complex there, and I think it's actually just on the border of the Salmon Chalice. it's kind of in that area where I think that is the Salmon Chalice National Forest, if I'm not mistaken, or it's just on the border of the Boise. And I do remember, I think at the time, I feel like it was maybe one of the first record of that sphagnum for Idaho, but and it was while we were doing work with Chris Murphy. I'm not sure, possibly Kristin was there. Otherwise, it was one other person we had on our field crew. And I mean, I think we probably would have filled out a rare plant form, and it was probably part of that Boise and Payette wetland riparian classification. So it was within our plots that we found that plant. So I don't really recall that much more about it. I hope that helps.
Yeah, I think it could still be monitored. I think the first population that we found, Lisa, was done at Cisash Summit on the Payette National Forest, done by Wolf Schofield and Judy Harpel. And then you got the next one. And then I think I did it, Michael was with Michael under Buckhorn Peak. So those are the three populations. But I think you might have some very good information on your site, right?
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure. I'm not with Fish and Game anymore, but so I'm not really up on what data is available for it. But I would imagine there's some good information about it. I'm not sure if that would be a Lynn question or maybe a Jim Strickland question.
I hate to jump in here, but I think we might need to wrap up conversation on this one and get to a vote so we can stay on time.
Great call.
All right, so I guess the proposal is rather than to overrule the rank calculator, make this an S1 and add it to the management lists. Okay, that looks like a positive vote, and we'll go ahead and move on to the next. Then I'll go ahead and start sharing my screen here. Let's see if we can't share. Right there. Okay, this next species is one that Harpo Faust found during her master's thesis research generating a flora for the Selkirk Mountains. This is not previously known for Idaho, and it's found along a road about roughly a half mile from the Canadian border. So the only place it's found in Idaho. So this is what it looks like. This is actually the road bed that it's growing up out of. It's not been previously found in Idaho, although this shows it as a SNR. Bonamp does not have any, well, Bonamp shows it occurs within Idaho, but it has no records as to where that would be. The actions that we've already taken, since this is the habitat that it's found in, it's right along this road prism. It's a road that's basically been abandoned. However, the Border Patrol is wanting to go ahead and reactivate this road so they can monitor the border better. They are going to upgrade the road, and we're really concerned because the only population is right down the road Prism. So what we sent off letters to Forest Supervisor and U.S. Border Patrol asking them to protect this population during the road construction. Rather than coming through here with a grader and scraping the entire population away, we'd hope they'd be able to come through and trim the brush back by hand in this particular section. So far, the U.S. Forest Service has done a really good job of trying to convey that to the U.S. Border Patrol. However, we're still waiting to find out whether we're going to be successful on that. NatureServe has it as the G4. Current rank is SNR under the season 1. Can you still hear me? My internet is saying it's unstable.
We've got you so far.
Okay.
If you start breaking up, we might just have you turn your video off.
And then we've got it being sensitive in region 6, which would be primarily Washington. So our recommendation is going to be an S1. So we have the one population probably takes up a few acres, if that, along that road. Therefore, there's one grid square, one occurrence, about 100, a population of about 100. I'm not sure whether it's good viability or not, so it's either A or B. Very high threat with, of course, the road work coming up and road use, ongoing road use, and then potential for forest fire. So the calculated rank comes out S1. I think that's all I've got. So any discussions on that? Let me stop sharing. All right, well, if there are no discussions, if you go ahead and vote on that. Okay, looks like we have a positive vote on that. I'll see if I can move on to the next then. Share screen. Share. Well, this isn't good. What did I do on here? Oh, here we go. Share. No, isn't. No, there we go. Good. The next species is Elymus hirsutus. It's another species that is newly discovered during Harpo's work in the Selkirks. It's basically more of a coastal species being found primarily just very northern Idaho. So if you're ever out and you're seeing some Elymus glaucus, it kind of has this little drooping spike. You might want to take a close look and make sure that indeed it is Elymus glaucus and not this particular species. Here's an example of the habitat. And it's primarily a coastal species with a little bit now just recently found in Idaho. And you can see also when you have when they scattered the actual specimens, you can see some of it's over here in the Canadian Rockies as well. So these are the Idaho known populations. You can see this line up here is the Canadian border. I don't know, that's probably about 10 miles below the border. You can see the four collections there. These two are actually close enough together to be considered a single EO. So there'll be 3 occurrences. It's not been listed in the well, it's not been listed at all for Idaho. Range extent very small, 5 square kilometers, 3 occurrences, 3 grid squares, population of about 500, either somewhere between 0 and 3 populations be considered to have good viability. Threats are unknown. It's calculated at S1. So any discussions on this species?
This is Lynn. Since Harpo's on the with us here today, Harpo, could you give us some concept of the threats?
Hi. I think for that area, that's mostly in the Smith Creek drainage in the Selkirks, which is adjacent. This is on Idaho National Panhandle Forest land, so it's on Forest Service land. I mean, some of those bigger populations were areas that I went back to with Ben Legler the second summer. The first season I found it, I thought I labeled it Elymus glaucus in the field, and then was like, it's funny, and looked at it and realized it was Elymus hirsutus. And then I got a confirmation from Mary Barkworth, and then went back to that general drainage area and found more populations of it. The biggest populations that we found, or that, with Ben, was adjacent to logging areas. They weren't active logging sites, they were older logging sites. So I don't know what the relationship is right there. I know Jennifer Kosich Thompson is not on today, and I texted her because I was curious about any updates for that area. But I know that, she's been fairly responsive to these species and what the presence of them means in that area. Adjacent to that corridor on the other area is the one historical grazing for the Selkirks, which is pretty close by, but I don't think it actually goes into this one specific creek, which is adjacent to the West Fork Cabin Creek. I don't know the other threats other than, because, it seems like there's something that could be potentially more abundant, but I did only find it in kind of Western red cedar, very moist, kind of nutrient dense forest. And it seemed kind of picky. It could potentially have a relationship with disturbance in one of the areas that I found, and maybe Ben is also on the line, can speak to some of the other threats, but that's my general thoughts as of right now. I don't know if Ben has other thoughts because he was with me on the second.
I think Ben has got a class commitment or something during this hour. So.
Okay. Well, never mind then. But yeah, that's my general understanding of the threats to those populations right now. I mean, there's potentially one of the populations that the initial population I found was literally on the main path, off the main path towards the West Fork cabin site, which is very highly recreated. but also when we say highly recreated for the Selkirks, it like means something different than in other areas, like for instance in Boise. So just because it's like a, I don't know, 12-mile dirt road to get there. So it is a popular area to go to, but I don't know how much recreation is actually going to threaten some of these populations, potentially over time, but as of right now, in the foreseeable future, I don't think so.
Well, when I put in low threats, so it sounds like the threats might be characterized more as low as opposed to moderate or high. But when I put in low threats, it comes out as an S2, just for.
Yeah, I think when you put it in as unknown, it kind of is probably comes in just about high or high medium.
I mean, I think our conversation around making it S1 when we did this was also for some of these species where we just don't have any other populations yet, and there's still like not a lot known, was starting them off at an S1 too was a part of that, just as kind of also in a way towards like encouragement and like looking for that species. But I don't know, or I mean, we had this conversation like over a year ago about this species. So I don't know, do you remember anything, Derek?
No, but I think it's coming out. As an S1 seems right. I would say probably if you were to factor in forest fires, since they're all right there in the same area, they might all be hit by the same forest fire. A number of things like that out of we can take some guesses, but I think unknown is probably characterizes it fairly well.
Yeah, I think that does make sense with how small the known population is too in the scheme of things. Like it's a very small area. So.
Okay, I'll go ahead and add the threats that you mentioned, including the forest fires. I'll go ahead and add those to the calculator, but we can still put in unknown on that if you want.
Okay, sounds good.
Thank
At
you.
least we'll have some record. Yeah.
Any other points on this? Are we ready to vote? Okay, let's go ahead and vote. Okay, looks like a positive vote to me. We'll go ahead and move on to the next. See, share screen. Share. Yeah, the next one is one I thought I picked up at Hager Lake when I was doing the project out at Hager Lake there in along near Priest Lake in Idaho, northern Idaho. Turns out I was wrong, but by the time I figured out I was wrong, I'd already started this one, so I'll go ahead and give this presentation. It's of course a moss. It has a very pointy appearance to it. It's found scattered throughout the United States and into Canada. Looking at the consortium of Pacific Northwest Herbaria, there are 5 records there with 2 sites, one in Bonner County at Gamble Lake, and there's 4 collections out of Atlanta Hot Springs. Then when you look at the consortium of North American bryophyte herbaria, you come up with 16, which comes back to 3 different, actually 4 different sites. And then there's a 5th site up in the Boundary Creek at Perkins Lake. That's one that Karen Gray is found in her materials, and she's just now processing it into the system. So altogether we have 5 things. So these are the locations. Perkins Lake up in Boundary County, Gamble Lake, Cedar Creek, which is right at its mouth. It comes right into Ponderay Lake, at Deer Creek in Idaho County, and down at Atlanta Hot Springs. So those are the 5 populations we've got. It's about a 13,000 square kilometer area. Again, nobody had this on their radar. 13,000 square kilometers, 4 grid squares. So four occurrences plus 1 historic occurrence. Unknown population sizes. I don't even know how to count moss populations. Don't know about the population viability, but certainly no more than 4. And unknown threats. Calculated rank comes out to be an S1, S2. So any discussions on this one?
So this is Angela Sondana, and this might be a good example of that range mapping question that was raised yesterday. It looks like you could have made 2 polygons in this case versus the one great big long funny looking one. And so again, I do think at some point the rare plant folks need to have another discussion to try to standardize our approach to the range mapping moving forward.
Yeah, I think the intent, if you look at the nature serve details, the intent is to capture how spread out these different populations are. And so therefore I would propose that we look at whatever the spread is across the state versus breaking it up into small chunks.
And that's typically been the approach that the North Idaho group has taken.
Okay, any other discussion?
Derek, which one of the populations is the one that's historic?
I think the one at the Atlanta Hot Springs was collected in the 40s. So that might be the historic one. I don't remember right off the top.
I think it is, Derek. I think it is. And I think that's Faye McFadden's collection.
Yes. So,
But we had additional collections at that site.
no, there are a whole bunch of collections, but they're all at the same time by the same individual.
Okay. Okay. And that is the farthest south of the sites then.
Yes, in fact, if you go through and look at mosses, she or he, I'm not sure which, collected a whole bunch of mosses at that one site. So that same time frame. Okay, any other discussions? If not, we can go ahead and vote. Okay. All right, it seems to be positive, so we'll go ahead and move on to the next. Share screen.
Derek?
Yes.
Derek, for my purposes as scribe, could you, at the end of each one, repeat the recommendation? I can see it on the spreadsheet, but it would be nice to have you say it.
Yeah, the recommendation is to rank it as an S1, S2. Is this Forest Service? Yeah, I think it's found in federal, so it's a managed appropriately. So.
And just while you're getting your thing up, Derek, one note I didn't mention yesterday is when we're ranking something like an S1, S2, or S2, S3, where we're, have a range of the S ranking, NatureServe will actually round those to the smaller number for their map display on that. So on the map display, that'll show up as an S1.
Show up as an S1, in their text, it'll show up as S1, S2. That's correct.
Yeah.
Okay. So next one, Carex Tenera. I was out doing some field work this year. Volunteer for actually a Vista in Idaho Fish and Game down along the lower St. Joe River, and I came across this one. So then once I got back and looked it up, it was only a couple places in the state. So it's one of those valleys, but it's got fairly separated spikelets. Widely distributed in the east, just scattered across the west, actually the northwest mostly. So we have 3 Idaho records, one by Matt Parks in Shoshone County up at Moses Butte. This one is fairly high compared to the other 2, so probably is worth taking a look at to see if that is indeed the specimen, is indeed the right species. But the other one, there's one by Peter Zika across the bay from Hope. And Peter Zika is, of course, the guy you would go to get these verified. So that is probably a pretty good record. And then there's mine. I couldn't find anybody to take a look at, but it seems to match up pretty good with what the habitat seems to match pretty good with what Peter Zika said his habitat was. So we've got at least one very positive, and then a couple others that are probably the right species. So. It's G5 species overall. No rank shown for Idaho. It's listed in Washington as sensitive for region 6. Recommendation is going to be an S1. Range extent is little over 2,000 square kilometers. 3 grid squares, 3 occurrences. Population size very roughly estimated between 250 and 1,000. One at least has good viability, possibly as many as 3, so they make it a B there. Threats are high, the primary threat factor being reed canary grass, secondary factor being habitat alteration, mostly water level manipulation. So calculated rank is an S1. Any discussions on this species?
Derek, S1 sounds good, but can you get somebody to look at those 2 specimens maybe?
I tried very hard, and you, along with everybody else at the last foray declined, so I don't know.
Well, somebody would be like Ben or Don or Peter Zika.
Yeah, I suppose so.
How about Alma? Can you look at him, Alma?
Not a Carex person.
Okay,
I mean,
I don't know. I thought maybe you were.
I looked in 3 different sources, and every time comes right out to the same species. So I'm pretty confident that that's it. And I think if I started actually doing surveys looking specifically for this, I'll find it at other spots as well, but haven't done that yet. So
Derek, I believe you.
there we go.
Derek's great with sedges. I just want to let everybody know that he's an amazing sedge identifier. But also, I'm wondering, did you specifically reach out to Peter Zika?
I have not. No, I didn't have time to do that.
just because I had a sedge or two that I've sent to Peter Zika and he's down, you just like have to be like, I am sending them. So, and I know that if that's like you need support around that, I'm happy to help.
Yeah, the collection I have is just a single stem. We were just doing our survey and I found something I didn't know, so I collected just a sample, not really a specimen, and that's all I've got. It's just a sample.
So, but are there other specimens?
I'd have to go out and find some more to actually have something to send to him.
Because I'm just like hearing people want more information or confirmation, and it seems like that's what needs to happen. And I'm like, because could it be something that we vote on it, but there's like a note that's like needs one more confirmation or one more specimen or something?
Well, I'm not sure how to handle that. So, Beth, any idea on how to handle that?
Yeah, I think, whether there's 1 or 3 specimens, it's going to be an S1. That's pretty clear.
That's
And
kind
so,
of the point I got to. So
yeah, so I think we can go ahead and add it to the rare plant list, but I think it would just be good to follow up on, any specimens that there's some question on.
Well, I'd like to get out and actually find more specimens, actually collect specimens instead of just taking, I just grab a little sample and go on, and that's not necessarily got everything that somebody might need.
Yeah, that's good. And Derek,
so I've got to find it again. I think I'll find it in more places. So
yeah.
Does anyone know if Joy Mastrogiuseppe is still active and living in Moscow and Pullman? Because she used to be the person I sent my sedges to for identification.
Yeah, I see. She's the author of a lot of the books that you use to identify sedges.
Yeah, and she's close to Idaho, so it might be living in Moscow. She used to have appointments at both Moscow and Pullman. I'm not sure what she's up to now.
Yeah,
I heard she was retired and not in good health, because we had at the Stillinger, we had like, I don't know, 4 cabinets of unidentified specimens of hers, and we tried to communicate with her, and we were getting rumors that she was not necessarily
sorry to hear that.
That's just what I heard like a year and a half ago.
Okay, so let me phrase this recommendation. I think our recommendation is that we rank this as an S1 and search for more specimens. Does that seem like a reasonable thing? You still go ahead and vote on that. Okay, looks to be positive there. I'll move on to the next species. How are we doing time-wise? I think
we're scheduled for a break right now. We're running a little bit behind on time, so we might.
Well, I was shooting for an 11 o'clock break, because I think Ben is going to be back somewhere after 11, and he's the next one going. So I think maybe from 11 to 11:10, if that works for everybody.
That works for us if everybody else is fine with it. So we'll stop you at 11.
Stop me at 11. Okay, I'll kind of run out of slides probably about then. So okay, Crytogramma stelleri, fragile rock break. Had no previous rank. We're recommending S1. There've been a couple collections over the years at the upper falls of the Priest River, Upper Priest River, which is maybe a half a mile from the Canadian border. This is what the species looks like. You can see Harpo down there doing some kind of work. So shows not being in Idaho. There are 3 Idaho records. There's 2 in Boundary County, both both collected there at right along the upper Priest River. And then there's a collection in the Sawtooth Mountains. And so I don't even know what county that one's in. So
That collection is not, that is, I think we annotated that specimen. It was a different,
Okay.
it's a ubiquitous cryptogramma. It's, I think it's just like a fragilis, or not fragilis, maybe it is a fragilis, I forget, but we annotated one, and the other one that's coming up is from a herbarium.
The other one is the common cryptogramma.
I forget which species, but
Yeah, it
I
starts with an A and it's
annotated it.
about 20 letters long or something.
Yeah, it's like I annotated it like a year and a half ago, but the other specimen that I think is coming up maybe from another herbarium or something.
Oh, okay. So one didn't get annotated. All right.
Yeah. So it's really just the ones in boundary.
Just the ones. Okay. Just just one location then.
Well, it's in two areas within, it's called American Falls. Some of you have probably been there. It's a very, a charismatic place up there.
Are they far enough apart to be too? When I looked at the other one was it Curtis Ford?
Not Curtis. It was Toby Sprible.
Oh, Toby Spribley. Yeah. His coordinates were degrees and minutes. So that put it a ways off the falls, but his description kind of said it was at the falls.
I thought the description was adjacent to, but I could be wrong.
Anyway, there's two very close together, within half a mile, maybe a mile. So maybe one, maybe two populations. It is listed in region 6 is the sensitive, but that's primarily Washington. Again, our recommendation is going to be S1. I'm assuming just the single population, perhaps two populations, considering the other one down in the Sawtooth as historic because it's not got anything that you can actually go check the population out again from ever. So either one or no populations that are actually have good viability. Maybe Harpo, you could let us know. I think it was fairly small population you found there. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's a very, there's totally different rock type over in that one corner that it's interested in. It's right below the falls. It's also rhizomatous, which makes it totally different than the other cryptogramma species that are up there. But it's it's not a huge extent in terms of that population. It's like the kind of like crumbly rocks underneath moving water.
Okay. The threat's not really characterized. Calculated rank comes out to be an S1. So any discussions on that? All right, if not, we can go ahead and vote.
While we're voting, I might say the only thread I'm aware of probably would be recreation in there, but if you all know another, I'll add it to the rank calculator.
I don't really know any others. I've never actually made it up there, so.
I mean, the one thing about there is that I don't know, it's like this thing where like a big weather event could potentially wipe out one of these two very small populations that are very fragile. But I think that it would essentially still come back in some regard because of its like rhizomatous nature. But I don't know enough about the ecology of that species, but I will say for that area, that is like the recreated spot in that corner of North Idaho. So
everybody goes to the falls. So.
Yep.
Yeah, so you're saying a flash flood might impact the population as well then?
I think, but I'm hoping that would just be temporarily, I guess.
Okay.
I don't know other people's understanding, but that was probably the most fragile species I've ever pressed and worked with. So.
All right. Let me check. Yeah, it looks like a positive ranking there.
All right, we've only got 2 minutes for the next one, so
Let's see, do I got one? I don't know if that was my last one or if I got another one
I
here.
think
Let's
there was
see.
one more scheduled for this morning, but I think in the interest of letting everybody have a break and use the restroom, we're gonna push that one to the after the break. Is that all right with you, Derek?
That sounds okay.
All right.
Oh, okay.
Clarify.
All right, so we'll take a
So
break.
yeah, we'll meet everybody back here at 10 after 11.
10 after 11. So Ben, are you back and ready to go?
Yes, just hopped back on, so I'm ready anytime.
Okay. We got another couple minutes of break, and then we'll go ahead and start off with your species then.
Okay, sounds good. What's the end of the break time?
A couple minutes.
Okay, all right. I will step out for a moment and be back.
All right. Hey, Brittany.
Yeah, Derek, what's up?
Ben's back, and I'll have him do his two species before I finish the rest of mine. So
That works for us.
okay, so I think he was looking to have you bring those up. So
Okay, I'll go ahead and get it up now since looks like we're just about ready to kick off again. Oh, there's Ben.
All right. Yep. Yeah. Either order is fine. Pull up either one.
Beth, I wanted to just make sure that I'm not doing any more scribing this afternoon, after break.
I believe Elle is on. Elle, are you scribing now? Maybe Nancy, keep taking notes for a little bit until I hear from Elle, okay?
I'm here. Sorry, it took me a second to find my mute button.
Oh, okay. Okay, great. Elle, you okay to take over scribing now?
Yep, ready to go.
Great, thank you. And thanks, Nancy.
There, you're ready, Ben.
Okay, are we ready to, everybody back from break, ready to jump in? All right, well, I'm going to look at two species from northern Idaho. The first one is Eliakras Mammalata. This is in the Cyperaceae family. The other one is also a Cyperaceae. So continue my theme of Cyperaceae from yesterday. This particular species isn't one that I reviewed directly, but I'm going to present on it here. Harpo Faust, who is a graduate student at the University of Idaho doing a floristic inventory in northern Idaho in the Selkirk Range, came across this specimen as part of her work, and it was misidentified, and she looked at it and puzzled over the identification and concluded that it was Eliacras Mammalata. So that led us to an investigation of the specimen to confirm that identification, and it turned out that was the first record of the species from Idaho. Derek Antonelli put together the original presentation for this, and so I'm just going to tack my name on there as presenting today. I want to make sure they're acknowledged as the ones that did most of the work here. Okay, so the recommendation for this will be to add it as S1 as a new addition to the rare plant list. For background, Eliakras Mammalata, it's Cyperaceae species that in the past has been confused with species like Iliacrus palustris and Iliacrus macrostachya. And these are a few quotes from Flora of North America that covers this species. Both of those others, macrostachya and palustris, are quite relatively common in our area as compared to Mammalata. So it makes for a tricky identification situation. These species are all very similar to each other, and they're distinguished by very minute differences in the structure of the spikelet, the scales, and the achines, and as well as the little bristles around the base of the achene, as you can see in that picture. There's only one subspecies of Eliakras Mammalata in North America, so we can interchangeably consider the species or the subspecies in the ranking process, and both would have the same rank for Idaho. Okay, next slide. This is our one specimen from Idaho, collected by Rob Bursick. The label I know is unreadable here, but he was from Bonner County up at a location called Chase Lake, which is near Priest Lake in the Idaho Panhandle. This specimen was originally identified as Eliakras Ovata. Ovata is an annual species that tends not to grow in the same habitat where this specimen was collected. When we were looking at the specimen, we realized that these plants on the sheet are perennials, not annuals, which led to trying to figure out what actually this plant was. And that, puzzling over it and going through the keys led us to Eliakras Mammalata. After we came to that conclusion, we contacted Peter Zika at the University of Washington Herbarium, who works on Cyperaceae, and we sent the specimen to him and got his confirmation that it was Eliakras Mammalata, and that's a species that he had worked with elsewhere in the Northwest. All right, next slide. So known distribution, what you see from the USDA plants database is pretty representative. It's a northern species across most of northern North America, just barely enters the lower 48 in Washington and a couple states around the Great Lakes. Only one of those is shown here. On the next slide is the distribution from BONAP, which shows a similar picture, fills in a little bit more from the Great Lakes area. For Washington, unfortunately, this map doesn't show the finer distribution within the state, but it's known from Northwest Washington along the west slope of the Cascades. All right, next slide. And I should note that Flora of North America shows a essentially the same distribution as those maps. NatureServe has this species in its database, and it is listed as rare, as S1, in a number of Canadian provinces as well as in Washington state. So this is not a common species, even though it is fairly widely distributed. The only place where the species appears to be fairly common is towards the west in British Columbia. This map does not include Alaska, but the species does occur in Alaska and is fairly common there as well. Washington just recently added it to the rare plant list for Washington based on those couple collections from Northwest Washington that had gone under the radar. One of them was collected in 2004, which represented the first record from Washington. The other one was collected, I believe, within the past 5 or 10 years. Idaho, of course, is not included on here because the species was not previously documented from the state. Okay, next slide. This is a distribution of herbarium specimen records out of the PNW Herbarium database. So you can see it extends from Alaska south, mostly in the coastal ranges to Vancouver Island and adjacent mainland BC. There are a few records scattered inland. Those red squares north of Seattle are the locations for Washington. And then there are a couple in southern BC near the border. The collection that we uncovered from Idaho is shown with the arrow in the Panhandle. Okay, next slide. So if we look at the number of records, there are 61 total PNW Herbaria records. Most of those are from Alaska or British Columbia. Washington only has the 2 records that I mentioned, and then Idaho has the one that we uncovered. So that Idaho record is from Chase Lake in Bonner County, Bursick 1588. As I mentioned earlier, that was originally identified as Eliakras Ovata, but we got that confirmed by Peter Zika as Eliakras Mammalata, and likewise Harpo and myself also agree with that identification. Okay, next slide. So this is the spot where Bursick collected that specimen, at least as far as we can tell. This is at the south end of Chase Lake near Priest Lake. Chase Lake has a whole lot of wetland habitat around it, and near the south end of the lake, apparently there's a area of floating peatland complex, which appears to be that area kind of with a reddish tinge near where the marker is placed on the map here. So on his label, he notes that this was collected from the peatland complex consisting of open floating sphagnum mats, and he notes that it was prominent on a floating buck mat. But that's all we have to go on as far as how much of it or what the extent of the population is at that site. And you can see there's some development around the edge of this lake, some private property and on the left, and I believe it's a resort of some sort on the right side down there. But otherwise, the lake appears to be essentially intact. Okay, next slide. So ranking factors, we have one occurrence to go on. That gives us a range extent of about a square mile and an area of occupancy of 1 4 kilometer square grid cell. Since all we have to go on is the information on the label, we don't know what the population size is, nor do we have a good handle on the viability of the population. And we don't have a whole lot to go on for the threat impacts. So there's a lot of unknowns here, which would be great if somebody could revisit the site and get a little more info about it, but that, to my knowledge, has not happened yet since this was just recently uncovered. But regardless of those unknowns, since we have a single collection from the state, that comes out quite cleanly as a S1. So that's the recommended rank that we propose adding this species to the list for Idaho as an S1. So that's all I have for that species, and go ahead and turn it back over to Derek to moderate questions.
I just want to, Harpo here, I just want to quickly say that, you know, the reason that the reason I didn't get more of this or specifically target this is because I found it like right as I was finishing up the flora, as I was going through historical specimens. And later that summer, Ben and I and a group of other people went up to the Panhandle to look for the Botrychium. And we stopped at Chase Lake on our way back and kind of did like a basic scout, which is like, unless you get private permission to go to those other areas to access that part of the lake, you would need a canoe to access that area. Just in case anybody's interested in going, I just wanted to give you that information.
Thanks, Harpo.
So
I'm glad you could join us.
So do
Okay,
we
Sandy.
have information on the ownership of that area?
I don't know off the top of my head what the lake itself is. The land around it is mostly private.
Yeah, Chase Lake is on Priest Lake State Park, or it's on Idaho state lands. So there's no management to my knowledge. I prepared a document with all of the species that are rare, or I included this one on it because I was like, it's going to be rare. And I gave it to somebody, I forget their name, the person who would be essentially the most responsible for sharing that information with land managers. And we walked through the areas that could potentially be developed for all of the rare species I found on Idaho state lands. And they were basically like, nothing's gonna happen here unless the private landowners change, and they'll have to communicate with us because they're adjacent to the lake and there's like a decent amount of recreation at the lake already. So they basically were like, we don't believe that there's something that's going to drastically change the habitat here. Unless I mean, the obvious thing would be for those floating mats, and that would be water levels changing. So.
Bob, do you have a comment?
Yeah, thanks. So this Chase Lake was part of the big peatlands inventory we did in Idaho back in the 90s. I don't remember this one specifically, but there are reports on the outcomes of all that work, both sort of the floristic part. Time to get a phone call, sorry. There is probably one or several reports on the peatland work that we did there that would include Chase Lake, you know, in the situation as of late 90s, FYI. And of course, Chase Lake has many other of these boreal peripherals that are rare in the state of Idaho. I don't think this is the only species, Idaho rare species that occurs there. Thanks, that's it.
Yeah, and I should mention that there are other potential habitat in the panhandle for this species. It's not, Eliakras Mammalata is not restricted to fens or sphagnum mats. It could occur in other wetland habitats as well. But as far as we know, this is the only record that exists right now.
Okay, so anybody else have any other questions? We ready to take a vote? So recommendation is that it be an S1. Okay, all looks positive. So Ms. Ben, you've got another species?
Okay. All right. I've let Brittany get the Carex podocarpa up. Okay. All right. Okay, thanks. My third cyperaceae for the session here, the 2 days. This is Carex podocarpa, common name of sword sock sedge, which is not currently listed as or ranked for Idaho. So we are proposing adding this to the rare plant list as S2. Next slide. This is what Carex podocarpa looks like. This is based on a collection that I made from Idaho County in 2020. It's a fairly distinctive Carex as far as sedges go. Some unique things to point out is that the spikes in the inflorescence are in life or dangling on these very slender, kind of weak peduncles that have them drooping down in life. The scales in the spikes are very dark, kind of a purplish black color, and very uniformly dark. You can see there on that blow up on the right side, there are really no pale margins to speak of on the edges of the spike or the scales, and there's no pale midrib down the center of the scales. And then if on the left side, there's a blow up of the base of the plant, and there's a black arrow pointing to a little leaf sheath down there. So another distinctive feature about this species that separates it from related species is that at the base of the stem, as the leaves become progressively reduced down to just these sheaths without a well-developed leaf blade. So next slide. Carex podocarpa is one of several species in a species complex that the individual species within that are pretty tricky to separate from each other, and they've been confused in the past, and there are plenty of misidentifications among specimens within this complex. So in addition to Carex podocarpa, there's Carex spectabilis and Carex paysonis, which are quite common and widespread within the Northwest, and then Carex microcata. Compared to Carex spectabilis, podocarpa lacks that pale midrib down the center of the scales. And you can see on the drawing of spectabilis on the right side, there's a pale line running down the scale. Carex paysonis has much larger perigynia than Carex podocarpa, and both spectabilis and paysonis have erect spikes on shorter peduncles in the inflorescence. So that's just to give you a sense of how these things are separated among the related species. And next slide. So the last work on this species complex was in 1970, and David Murray comes back again. He was also involved in the one I looked at yesterday with a publication in 2013. So apparently he's been at Carex for a while, but in 1970, he looked at Carex podocarpa and its allies in North America and clarified the differences between them, including spectabilis and paysonis, and went over those characters that they're helpful for identification. So that's what we have to go on as far as the best or what is still current knowledge for this group of species. Okay, next slide. So this is where things get messy when we start looking at the known distribution of Carex podocarpa. Because of those similar species and misidentifications among herbarium specimens, there's a lot of error in the distribution of this species. This is the map from BONAP, and in western Montana, within our area, that's the primary extent of the distribution of the species, all those counties highlighted in light green. The species also extends northwards into boreal North America. But then as we head west from Montana, there are several counties in Idaho that are noted here in BONAP. Turns out those are all based on misidentifications. So all those Idaho counties that are highlighted there can be wiped off the map, basically. Likewise in Washington, that's based on misidentifications. So Washington gets taken out of the distribution picture. Nevada, I'm not sure about the record on that. It's way out of range, but I don't have anything to go on to determine the validity of that. It turns out the record from Northeast Oregon is correct, and that actually is cited as a specimen in Murray's 1970 publication. Okay, next slide. This is the distribution of specimens from the PNW Herbaria database. You can see it's pretty widespread to the north of us, and then it drops down through British Columbia into Montana. All those yellow dots are records presumed to be valid. The red dots are records presumed to be incorrect. If we go to the next slide, we'll zoom in on the northwest. So you can see the distribution coming down through the mountains of Montana with those yellow dots, but then all those red dots in Idaho, and in purple dots in Idaho and into Washington. The majority of those, at least the ones in Idaho, I've been able to verify are misidentifications. The ones I've been able to examine from Washington are likewise misidentifications, but I haven't been able to examine all those specimen sheets there. But based on the known distribution of the species and the pattern of misidentifications, I think the most reasonable conclusion is that those dots in Washington are all misidentifications of the species until something is proven otherwise. In the case of the Idaho collections, there are 13 herbarium specimens from Idaho. I was able to verify all 13 of those, either through specimens themselves or through images of specimens. And in some cases, it required digging up duplicates of specimens at other herbaria for ones that I could not directly examine. And I was able to pull up duplicates for all those and use those duplicates to determine that the specimens were misidentifications. So of those 13, 10 were misidentifications. That takes out all those red dots that are shown in the central part of Idaho, leaving us with 3 collections from right along the Idaho-Montana state line in the Clearwater and Shoshone County areas. So if we go to the next slide, we'll zoom in on that. So those 3 collections is a historical collection by Liburg that's up at Stevens Peak, which I believe is also the site of a couple other rare plants. A collection that Krista O'Connor made in 2016 from the Clearwater National Forest as part of her floristic inventory. And that specimen that I examined is at W2. I tried to find the due period RM, but we have not been able to locate it yet, if it exists. That's a bit puzzling. And then a collection I made in 2020 from the area around Rhodes Peak in the south end of the Clearwater. That collection is what led me to the species and to propose it for listing. Okay, next slide. So looking at NatureServe's info on this, they have it listed as S1 in Wyoming, and it does occur, it just barely dips into the northwest corner of Wyoming. S4 in Montana because it's fairly widespread there, and then no information for Idaho, Oregon, or Nevada. Okay, next slide. So if we go through the ranking factors, this occurs right along the state line with Montana. So I'm going to draw a polygon around the 3 Idaho occurrences, and then I'm also going to include some that are immediately on the state line in Montana to come up with a range extent of about 600 square kilometers within the state. Next slide. So we take that and add in the other ranking factors. We have 3 collections, which gives us 3 4 square kilometer grid cells for the area of occupancy. Population sizes. based on the collection I made, I estimate there's in the ballpark of 100 stems at that site. The other two collections have no data about how common the species was there. So we can only speculate on the total population size. I'm going on the assumption that it's in the range of several hundred plants total. Viability of those collections is unknown. I think the site where I found it, it's pretty good viability because it's pretty intact habitat. All these sites are up in the mountains in areas that are pretty isolated from development and recreation and trails and so on. So there's not much opportunity for direct human impacts to them. So I think the threats are fairly low from direct human impacts. Of course, there may be threats from things like drought and climate change in the long term that could affect this. So if we run all those values through the rank calculator, then we end up with a rank of S2, which is what I feel is appropriate for the species. However, that rank is sensitive to the population size that we plug in. And if depending on which bin we put in there, it could end up as either S1 or S2. I think the most reasonable conclusion is that the population size is somewhere over 250 individuals across those three sites, which led me to the rank of S2. But there's wiggle room there as far as how we want to handle that. And another option might be to put it as an S1/S2 instead of a straight S2. So that can be something for discussion. Another thing to note is that area along the border with Montana, there's a lot of habitat that's hard to get to. And even with Krista's inventory of the area, there's still a lot of opportunity for additional collecting there and filling in gaps that could uncover additional populations of the species. But I wouldn't expect it to occur or to be likely to occur too far outside of that area elsewhere in Idaho. I'd expect it to be along that strip of the state bordering Montana. So, okay, so that's what I have, either S2 or S1/S2, and I'll open it up for questions now.
Just a comment, I think this might be a good opportunity for the 25 peaks searches that might be coming up here in the future. So if we have a couple of these peaks, that might do us some good. So. Anybody else have any other questions? I guess I would propose that we go with S1, S2. And if there are no comments, let's have a vote on that.
So the vote will be S1, S2.
That seems appropriate. We're kind of in that transition zone. So.
Would the reasoning be because there's only two recent locations and then the one historic? Is that the thinking of why to bump it up to S1, S2?
The fact that the population is not nailed down and a slight variation in that population gets us an S1 or an S2 seems like a good thing. And the other is if we got more specific on some of the threats, perhaps the threat would be put up a little bit and it would also then drop to an S1.
Okay, thanks.
I don't see much room
recording it.
Yeah, I don't see much room for the threats to be increased because there's based on the sites. But really it is the population sizes and the number of populations given the sparse collecting up there.
Yeah, sometimes we rank climate change threat higher for these high elevation, moist habitat plants. So that's, that could be arguable.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, maybe you said this already. If we change the population size to 50 to 250, then it goes to an S1.
Yep.
So
Drop
what?
250, it's S1. Above 250, it's S2.
Yeah. So, I mean, you could even put in BC, which will probably come out S1, S2. Just guessing. I mean, I can try it here, but.
Yeah, that would probably be the way to go.
Because that probably makes more sense anyway.
Yeah, and in terms of assigning an S2 rank, I just went with what seemed like the most reasonable numbers rather than accommodating a range of scenarios.
Actually, BC still leaves it as S2, which I'm surprised. He doesn't adjust it to S1, S2, which is as I said, surprises me, but.
So we're running a little over time on this one. If there's any more conversation that needs to happen, we can definitely have it, but it'll make the rest of the presentations a bit shorter.
Okay, looks like we're all fairly positive on these. So go ahead and accept that at S1, S2. And I will move on to next species here. Share. Okay, Monarda fistulosa, menthifolia, the mint leaf bergamot. There's a little bit of confusion on the names, but I think the only variety we have is the menthifolia. Although there's some in the herbaria that are the subspecies fistulosa, but I think those are fistulosa actually with the variety menthifolia. So when you actually look at it, it seems like it's all just a single taxon. So this is what that looks like. Mint family, you see it's widespread throughout much of the eastern United States, and we're just kind of on the margin here. Those 4 counties are pretty consistent with the specimens that I've been able to find. 12 records, but from 7 locations. There's one in right in the Bonners Ferry area, and there's another one in the mountains, Moyer Springs, along the roadside. There's a couple in Bonner County, Blanchard and Hope, two opposite sides of the county. Kootenai County has Idlewild Bay, which is right on Lake Pend Oreille. Very south tip of Pend Oreille Bay, or Pend Oreille Lake, and in Idaho County, in near the towns of Kamiah and Kuski. These are the specimens. You can note that except for the 92 one, they're all 50s and before, so all historic. The one that Lieberg has listed it as Idaho, but when you looked at the details, I couldn't find a county, or I couldn't find a city in Grantsdale. But when you do a search on Google, you come up with Grantsdale, Montana, and that just happens to be along the Bitterroot River, which happened to match the description. So I contacted Oregon State and let them know, and I think they probably pulled that out of or put that into Montana instead of Idaho. So everything is historic, and that kind of, except for the one that was collected in 92. But that was going to be very difficult to locate because all it says is it's on the roadsides in the mountains. So if you use all the historic occurrences, this is what the range extent would be 9,000 square kilometers. If you just looked at the single one, of course, it would be just 1 square kilometer. It's listed as sensitive in Montana, but not Idaho. It is state not ranked in NatureServe. In Washington, it's listed as sensitive, region 6. Recommendation that I have is S1 or S2, unless you just look at if you exclude the historic sites, of course, it'll be an S1. So depending on which way we look at it, whether we include historic or not, it's with all these factors, comes out S1, S2. So I guess the only discussion is, do we want to include those historics or exclude those? So it'll either be an S1 or an S1, S2. And stop shoe. So anybody have thoughts on that?
You've got a comment from Mike Hayes in the chat that there's a fairly large occurrence near Stites that has not been reported.
Near where?
Stites. That's going to be a few miles from Grangeville, between Grangeville and Kuski.
Oh, okay. So yeah, we might be low on that. So maybe the S1, S2 would be the way to go.
Mike, has that site been vouchered and a rare plant report submitted anywhere?
No, it has not. It's about 6 miles south of Kuski, 6 or 7 miles. I haven't even counted. I'm sorry. I didn't realize we were looking into this species. It was one, for years I thought, maybe we should. When I saw it was being reviewed, I thought I sent information on the population to Derek in an email, but maybe I just planned to and then never did. So I don't have a good feel of how large the population is, other than I did drive alongside it for a while. So I think it's fairly substantial. Yeah, I just wonder about the historic collections. Do we have a good handle on where those are? Would it be pretty easy to check out?
Well, they're fairly generic. So, but one of them was in Kuski, so maybe that's the same population. So,
well, the one in Kuski, I think I read the label, but it's collected by Chris. I got the impression that it's on the hill north of the junction of Highway 12 and 14, or 13 rather. So it would be several miles from the I say Stites, we really should call it Luke's Gulch population. It's a little bit up right at the mouth of Luke's Gulch.
Okay.
Which is a few miles south of Stites. I know I've given several people here Monarda Seed. That's from increase in my garden. It came from this site, so it's probably the genetically the most widespread occurrence in Idaho. But if anyone still has that, if anyone wants some, I've got quite a lot of it. But yeah, I don't know if it doesn't make much difference in the range of the species. It's another population. I would probably say 50 to 100 plants. It could be much larger than that, but I don't want to say that unless I go look at it. And maybe I can do that this spring. Or
I would propose
in early summer.
I would propose that we go with the S1, S2 ranking then. Anybody have any other discussions on that? Or are we ready for a vote? Okay, let's go ahead and vote. Okay, that looks positive. We'll go with S1, S2. Let's see, the screen share. Oh, find the right button there. Okay, the next one is Mitella trifida. Also, probably more recently, Osmilla Strife. I use Mitella because that's still the name that's used in NatureServe. Again, you can see the trifid petals of that. This just shows it in Boundary County, but it's also found in other counties in Idaho. Excuse me. There's 7 records in About 5 firm locations in Boundary County. Bonner County has one. Kootenai County has an historic. Shoshone has an historic. Latah has an historic. There's one in Idaho County, and there's 4 collections. I'm not sure if it's 1 or 2 locations in Caribou County. These are those locations. Oops. Some of them are fairly recent, some are fairly old. So here's the clusters. You've got a cluster here up north, and then they spread out here. The Little Potlatch Creek is one of the historics. I think the Powell might be a little bit more recent. These are the ones in Caribou County. Range extent is about 18,000 square kilometers. Nobody had it listed yet. Recommendation is for an S2. Range extent comes out as an E. 7 or 8 comes out as D. 7 or 8 again occurrences. Population size unknown. Don't know how many viable populations there are. Don't have information on the threats. Comes out with a calculated rank as an S2 question mark. So I would propose that we go with the S2. Any discussions on that?
We've got a question from Harpo in the chat asking if the Caribou County collection has been verified or not.
Trista Cook, I think, took a look at that, and it's one. The original ones were fairly old. They were by Carl Holte, and then somebody else collected one that Trista Cook verified. All right. Any other discussion? Okay, let's go ahead and vote then.
Just to clarify, Derek, are we voting on it being S2?
S2, yes.
Okay, because I think that looks like the calculator comes out as S2 question mark, but
yeah, S2 question mark is what the calculator came out with.
Okay, but
I think that's because of the range on some of those things.
Okay, so I'm just thinking I have to give an adjustment reason in the calculator. I guess we'll say because it's solidly less than 10 locations or something. Because we just don't have a lot of information on this. We don't have population size. We don't have threats. There's not much we can.
Yeah, I think the main driver fact is probably the good viability on the things. It's from 0 to 8, I think, is what I use. So
yes, you did.
Okay, that looks generally positive, so we'll go ahead and accept that. Let's set 1, here's set 2, no. Found the right one, okay. Next is a moss, Botrychium bigelowii. Bigelow's Botrychium moss, of course, has a lot of different synonyms. Previous rank was none, and we're recommending an S2 on this one. Mostly coastal, a little scattered out to the east. So Montana has it as an S1. British Columbia has it as an S4. These are the different collections. Lieberg had a number of them around Lake Ponderay. Alma had some along the Salmon River at Man Creek. Yeah, several other places. Karen Gray had a number along the Clearwater. I found that at Hager Lake. This is what the range extent looks like. About 10,000 square kilometers. Nature Serve has this as a G4. Idaho has it ranked as, well, it doesn't have it ranked as of yet. My recommendation is going to be as an S2. Uh-oh, got the wrong range extent in here, but I don't think it makes any difference. 7 populations, a couple historics, all the way through. It's another S2 question mark. And so the same logic we're going to use. I'm recommending S2. Any discussions on this one?
You mentioned you had the wrong range extent. What should I put in here?
I think the other slide up above had it as 10,000. So I don't think that even changes the category.
Yes, that's right. It's still in a 3,
Yeah.
Whether it's 5,500 or 10,000 square
Or
kilometers.
18,000. I think they're all the same, aren't they?
Yes, they are. It's because it's 5,000 to 20,000 square kilometers. Okay, so I don't need to change the calculator.
Yeah, you can see the comment. I might have gotten the comment right there, so I don't know. Okay, any other discussion? Go ahead and vote on that then. Okay, everything looks fairly positive, so we'll go ahead and accept that as an S2. And move on to the next one. Share. This was Carex Limosa. It's been located in the same place as a lot of rare plants. And so I started looking at that saying, oh, geez, is this rare or is this not rare? I said, well, at least it's worth taking a look at. So hasn't been previously ranked. I think it was always assumed that it was fairly common. My recommendation is going to be as an S3, and that's the mud sibs, Carex Limosa. Here's kind of what it looks like. It's got that drooping spikelets. So what's your couple of the similar ones have that as well. You can see it spread fairly well across the northern tier of the United States and on into Canada. This is where the populations are. Big cluster up here, North Idaho. I think that's Rose Lake in Kootenai County, and then some in Valley and Valley, and I don't know. Oh, maybe that's Idaho County. Valley County comes across over here in Yellowstone National Park at the fen in there. But this is a fen species, and pretty widespread. Quite a few samples. G5 SNR for Idaho. Nobody really had it listed yet. Recommendation is actually S3, S4. It is got a large range extent. 24 occurrences, 24 grid cells, estimated at about 10,000 population. Good viability, at least 13, with good viability. The threats are fairly high. And I evaluated the threats, not specifically addressed to this, but addressed to the same habitats that these other two species, Melagenica and Cordoariza, have. So they're living in the same habitats. They'll have the same threats, and those threats were high to medium. When you do that, it calculates out S3. Okay, discussions.
We got a comment from Kristin in the chat that we ran into a fair amount of it this season here on the Payette in some of our smaller fens.
Okay.
Particularly where there are some floating mats.
All right. So a number of new populations then?
We haven't been mapping it.
We haven't been mapping them.
Can you hear me? We haven't been mapping Carex Lamosa. So yes, they would be new populations that could be documented.
Okay, yeah, if there's a number of new populations, it might drive it to an S4 fairly easily, because it's kind of right on the
seeing
border.
it three different fens this season.
Okay, 3. Yeah, that'll probably keep it in that same ballpark then.
But that was like 3 of 3. So, and we're getting out to inventory more, so we can continue to look for it, map it.
Yeah, and it might be I've already picked up on those, that there weren't any IFWIS records directly for the species, but Jim sent me copies of EO records for other species that it was listed as an associate species. So that allowed me to nail down a number more populations that I didn't have from herbaria records.
Derek, the calculator that I'm looking at, the version that I'm looking at, just has a solid S3.
Okay.
So do you know of
Yeah.
anything, what might have changed, to make it an S3, S4?
I think we adjusted the rank or the threats.
This says high to medium.
Yeah, I think we adjusted those up to high to medium, and that's what we got then.
Well, no, I've got high to medium in here, and it's an S3.
Yes. So that's what's you asked what had changed from S3 S4 to S3, solid S3, and I think we looked at looked at the threats, adjusted those, and it came out to a solid S3 at that point.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so you're not recommending it, because I think your slide said that the working group had recommended S3, S4, but that's not correct. It's actually just an.
Well, that was the original recommendation to the working group, and then we talked further about the threats, and and then dropped down to the S3.
Okay, so the working group's recommendation is S3.
So I missed updating that on the slide.
Okay, just to clarify.
So we're going with an assigned rank of S3 then?
That's the proposal, yes.
Okay.
So any other comments, discussion?
As I look over these factors, even if we add in 3 more of Kristin and Brittany's, it won't change the rank.
Yeah, it's got a fair number already, so.
Yeah.
Okay.
But in time, if we document it, we might be able to.
Yeah, and that's part of the
off.
problem. Nobody's really been documented, so
Yeah.
maybe it's more common than we know.
Yeah.
But it seems to be restricted to those rarer habitats. So.
Yeah, and I just so you guys know, we've just got groundwater dependent ecosystem mapping done for the Payette, and we've been ground truthing it. So we've been getting out to more fens, and wherever we do run into Carex lamosa, we are seeing other rare species as well, or rarer, like fen obligates, like Drosera and Minianthes. So we can continue to keep track of that, but as a, yeah, the habitat is rare.
Yeah.
Okay, I see a number of well, all positive, but I got a feeling that people are really going to want to take a look at this over the future. So yeah, if you do come across those, if you could drop those to me, I will reevaluate this in a year or two and see if the S3 actually holds. So
Yeah, look at Bob's comment in the chat too.
yeah, I saw that one. So there might be more out there, and we don't know until we start collecting the data. All right, so it looks like S3 might be what we're talking about, at least for now. With a recommendation to review in several years. Okay, what is it? Oh, the next one's my favorite one. I keep this one going for years and years and years. So Muhlenbergia racemos, I started reviewing this back in 2016. And we went through the Rare Plant Working Group and took it to the Rare Plant Conference in 2018. At that time, I couldn't find, it was called out in like 8 counties, but I couldn't find any records to back any of that up. I checked the consortium and got 2 hits, and I checked the other the Intermountain, and I got no hits. And I took that to the Rare Plant Conference, and somebody says, well, hold on, somebody's gone off and done a survey back in 1999. So took a look at that. So they sent me off to take a look at the survey, put it on hold, looked at the survey, came back in 2020. And again, it was just those 2 records were all we had. The survey actually went out and looked for it, but came back empty. So it was evaluated as an S1 in 2020. Then I don't know, I don't remember what caused me to look, but I looked at the actual image of the specimen and looked at the label, and I saw that the collector had in 1991 annotated it as a different species of Muhlenbergia, which didn't get updated in the consortium at that point, and therefore I was looking at the record wrong. So that meant the one specimen that we had that was causing it to be an S1 was gone, and all we had was a historic record from that Lieber had collected in 1897, I think. So went through several more iterations. Next time I checked the Intermountain Herbaria, all of a sudden 8 records pop up. So I went through all of those, and I'll give you the answers that I found out from that. Anyway, this is what the species looks like. You can see the different eight different counties in Idaho, kind of scattered all across the state. But again, only the 2 records that I found in 2020. Later, it turns out, well, and the Caribou County surveys, Fremont Caribou County surveys found no racemosa. So these are the 2 records that I was left with. Henderson and was the current one, and historic was Lieberg's at the south end of Priest Lake. Looking at this first one, this is the specimen, and when you actually zoom in on the label, you can see that Henderson had annotated this as Mexicanus. So once I figured that out, there goes the one specimen I had. So that left just just Lieberg's specimen. So I contacted Oregon State to take a look at that one, make sure it was Racemosa. And the answer came back was either Racemosa or Glomerata, but it was inconclusive because some of the characters said it was Glomerata and other of the characters said it was Racemosa. So you got a very vague answer here. But then looked again at the Intermountain Herbaria portal, and all of a sudden a whole new, so I must have done my search wrong initially. But this time around, it popped up with another specimen, one from Sandpoint Substation. That was by Christ in 1933. Looking at the herbaria label, you can see it's been annotated as being Muhlenbergia racemosa by a study that Iowa State was conducting on the Muhlenbergia. So now I've got, but I was concerned because it says introduction nursery, and I thought it might have been a cultivated, but further consideration, I think it was probably just a weed at the agricultural station there in Sandpoint. So we've got one historic here, and then also popped up in that Intermountain Consortium of Herbaria was another one collected in 1900 at St. Anthony in Idaho, and that same group from Iowa State had determined that was Racemosa, and somebody else later on determined it was Racemosa as well. So everybody's agreeing there. So what I'm left with are two or three historic populations, but none of them are in existence as far as I could tell. So it's 0, number of occurrences was either 2 or 3, but they're all historic. So everything drops out. It comes out calculated out as SX. My recommendation is that we go with an SH, continue searching, and we might find the species. So any discussions on this one?
This is Lynn. To actually say that it's SX, we would have to, well, at least by NatureServe's description, we would have to either show that the sites have been destroyed, or you would have to go looking for it. I think it's like 5 times in a 12-year window or something, and not find it. And then we could determine that it was actually extirpated. But you can't, we don't, using NatureServe's criteria, just say, well, the records are old, so we're going to call it SX. So I kind of think we ought to, instead of putting zeros in those places, I think we ought to go ahead and put 2 for the St. Anthony and maybe the Sandpoint location, or maybe there was a third one I got mixed up, but I think we should put actual numbers in there, and then it will come out as SH.
It won't come out SH.
Oh, you're right. It'll come out as S1 probably, and then we'd have to say.
It comes out as S1, but
yeah.
But I think as SH is the way, or SX, and the calculator's right, and so we just saying is SH because we haven't verified that indeed those populations are gone.
Right, but that's why SX is not a correct. We haven't entered the right thing in the calculator because we don't know, in fact, that there aren't populations there. To put in a 0 is incorrect. In other words, you have to have met the criteria that NatureServe says have gone there 5 times in a 12-year window and not found it during the right time, right search window, and not found it. So that's what I'm saying. We need to put actual numbers in the calculator, not zeros. But then, as you say, it'll come out S1, and we can say, well, they're too old.
I thought it was the other way around. You go in, it comes out as SX, but we don't accept SX because we haven't gone back and verified there's nothing at those spots.
Well, it's
We're
coming
both
out.
saying the same thing. We're coming in at from different angles. So
Yeah, we are. I'm just saying in terms of what we enter, we shouldn't enter 0 because we don't know that 0 is correct. To be consistent with what we've done in the past, we consider old records. We don't always say old records for 0. We just say they're historic or whatever.
Yeah, one way we could do that is to use the range. So if the number of occurrences is 0 to 3, somewhere between those, and put those numbers in the rank calculator.
Oh, that's a good way to do it. That's right. Forgot we did that.
So we'll come up with an S1 and we'll have to overrule that.
Yeah, we're going to assign it an SH no matter what. So yeah, that works fine.
Okay.
Yeah. And are there 2 or 3 locations? There's Sandpoint, St. Anthony, and was there another one?
There's Leeburg's at the south end of Priest Lake. It gives you about a search zone of about 20 miles, I think.
Okay. Okay, so there's 3.
And the Sandpoint substation, there are 2 properties at in Sandpoint that used to be agricultural stations. One of them has been sold off and is probably converted to, I don't know, whatever development they were planning to do. Although I think on the margin of Sand Creek there's probably still habitat, but it's more of a wetland forest there. And then the other one was at St. Anthony's, which is which was one of the sites that was surveyed in the 1999 survey. It came up empty for the target species. So, and let me. And then one of the documents I looked at was the red book that Michael had mentioned, and that actually talks about it. In fact, that's the first one talked about Glomerata and racemosa. And one of the things that actually started me looking at this species, it talks about some other populations, but in some of those other counties, but there was nothing to back up those particular locations, no specimens or anything. So. So if I understand it, the proposal is to update those numbers to include the historics and then overrule whatever the ranking is to.
It actually comes out SH. When I put all that information in, like Beth suggested the ranges, and I have no idea why it comes out SH, but it does come out that.
Huh. I don't know.
Oh, it says because I entered a Z range.
A Z range. Yeah, there you go. A Z range in.
Yeah, the 0, like I put 0 to 5 for number of occurrences. And so it comes out SH. I didn't know it would do that.
Huh. A Z, huh? And a Z was what I was using.
Right. When you use only Z, it comes out SX. But when you use like Z to 3 or Z to 5, whatever, then it comes out SH. Kind of strange.
Oh, okay. So every one of them has a 0.
Yes.
But a 0 with a range. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, let's go ahead and vote on this.
All right. So I think the proposal is that we update the rank calculator and go with the SH. Okay, looks positive on that. So move on to the next one. What we got, about 10 minutes here?
Well, so
Derek, Beth's scheduled to do her closing remarks now, but she's going to cede a little bit of time to you to get one more plant in.
One more plant in, okay.
Yeah.
I'll give it a shot here. Share. Next one, Carex lacustris, the lake sedge. It's listed as a state priority, so it's already on the list. Our recommendation is going to be an S1. I'm also recommending that the Fish and Game add this to their wildlife management plans because the only places it's found are associated with Fish and Game. Curtis Bjork found this. This is one of his collections. This is kind of what it looks like. You can see it shows here just Boundary County, but it's actually Boundary and Bonner County. Bonner County is it's at Granite Lake. It's actually at the Fish and Game access site in a marsh next to where the boat ramp is. And then up at Boundary County, there's a couple collections that Curtis had done. They are both at MacArthur Lake, which is in Boundary County. I couldn't tell if they're far enough apart or close together to count it as one or two. So I just counted it as a single population. The two, so with two EOs, they're 59 kilometers apart. I use that as the range extent. Again, they actually have EO records, one at Boundary County and one at Bonner County at Granite Lake. You can see those are here and here, and then you can see it's also spread a number of different sites, widely scattered, but still existing within inland Northwest. IMPS has it as a state priority 1. Nobody else has it listed. My recommendation is an S1. Here are the factors: a population size of about 2,000 plants. One population was evaluated as being good. The other population didn't have an evaluation, so it's either one or two populations that are good, but they get you a solid B. Threat impacts, Curtis mentioned that the activity at the nearby dock and the parking lot may have an impact on one, and I point out that that there is some protection within the WMA for the ones at the MacArthur Lake. So my calculated rank was S1, and that's what I propose we go with. Also a recommendation of Fish and Game add it to their wildlife management plans. I think those are two separate plans. Any discussions on that? See if I can. Okay, if not, we can go ahead and vote. So Kristin is saying that if we don't mind, we can forge on for a few. I think they go pretty quick. In fact, I think I got one more. I don't remember. One more, two more. I can do the other one because there's just two specimens as well. So.
Hey, Derek, this is Kristin. Let's just, after we get done with this rank vote, we'll record the voting outcome, and then we will do a really quick poll of the group to make sure that people are okay with staying on. And then we can move on if that is the outstanding response.
Okay. So what I'm seeing is pretty well positive here. So it's like we're accepting S1 added to the management plans. Okay, is everybody okay with staying on an extra 5 minutes?
I think we're good.
Looks like we'll have a quorum, so I'll forge on with the next one, and hopefully it won't take any longer than this one did. If I can find that, figure out how to do it. Here we go, share. Okay, the next one, Carex Cycnocephala, many-headed sedge. It is currently listed as a state priority 1, so it's already on the list. Recommendation is to be an S1. There are a couple changes to the management side. This is what it looks like. This shows it being found in Idaho County, but it's more recently been found in Boundary County, and there's a record down in Twin Falls County. And the record in Twin Falls County turns out to be an erroneous record. So the new record in Boundary County is Nims Ranch, which is on Kalispell tribe property near Bonners Ferry along the river. Idaho County, it's at Crater Lake in the Seven Devils area. And then the Twin Falls County one's at the Salmon Falls Creek. But Don Mansfield took a look at that one, and he says it is not Cycnocephala. It's a different sedge. He's not positive which one it is. Taking that, we've got then the 2 specimens, one at Nims Ranch and one at Crater Lake. They're about 377 miles or kilometers apart. State priority 1, Forest Service Region 1 has it listed as a type 1. It's listed as in Washington, it's listed as sensitive. BLM has it as a type 2. I think that one is based on the Twin Falls County population. So that would probably want to be removed from that. Recommendation is going to be an S1. These are the factors I used. Basically 377, 22, about 150 plants. Good viability in at least one of the populations. Unknown threats. Recommendation is an S1. Any discussion on that? Okay, if nobody has any comments, we can go ahead then and vote as S1, just a BLM management. All right, and looks like that's accepted. And I guess we're back to Beth for closing comments.